Joining me today is New Hampshire Executive Councilor Chris Sununu, and he's running for the governor in New Hampshire. So Chris, our last issue, I got a bunch of, as I said, a potpourri of issues.
Well, you can invite me back. That would be great.
We'll be happy to do that. First, as executive councilor, you look at a lot of contracts, you look at appointments. I want to talk about two from the most recent session. Jerry Little.
Yes.
Was that a good decision by the governor? If you were the governor, would you have appointed him?
Absolutely, and I voted very strongly to confirm him. Senator Little has done a great job in the Senate. He has 20 years of experience, had represented a lot of the banks and the banking community, understands those issues, was never a banker himself per se, but really does understand the issues, and I think he'll bring that experience to the front lines as a banking commissioner, and we need some stability in that department for sure. I think the governor made a great choice in that.
And the people who say, oh, it's the fox minding the hen house.
I think that's a nice 140-character soundbite. But the fact is that Jerry doesn't have interest in any banks. He has represented them before, which means he understands their issues. If he's actually gone above and beyond in the state Senate in terms of making sure he recused himself from certain issues. But as the head of the banking department, you really need someone that does understand a very complex regulatory environment. So you don't just want to bring in someone who doesn't have experience with that. It's good to have folks with experience, and I think he's going to do a great job.
Okay, another issue that you didn't vote on, and I understand why you recused yourself, and I get that. Mm-hmm. Working for Waterville Valley,
sure.
Taking an issue that a competitor, somebody's got to ski somewhere. So now that your opinion doesn't matter in a vote, how would you have voted on it?
I think the whether you're talking about the Mount Sunapee expansion, whether you're talking about Mount Sunapee expansion or really any recreational environment, anything we can do to grow our economy. Tourism is such a big part of this state as an economic driver. That has to be our focus. And in that respect, it's a great project. Any project, like I said, any project across the state that is doing something to invest capital, create jobs, move the dial forward, those are great things that I think we need to work hard on. And I compliment the Department of Resource and Economic Development. They spent 2 years working with the public, listening, addressing comments, making sure we were being I'm an environmental engineer, so I take that stuff very seriously. And they made sure we're being environmentally sound and sustainable. I think it's a great project. I think any project that invests that kind of money and capital, especially given the season we had, we have to take advantage of it as a state. And so I'm happy that the rest of the councilors voted for it.
So. Speaking of environmental engineering, that's sort of my next question. We're seeing sort of potentially a pollution that may or may not come from a factory spreading through a number of towns here in
Merrimack. Yeah.
What's the state's role in that sort of thing?
First and foremost, the state has to protect the individuals, of course. And so the state has been very active in making sure we're testing their water for those who have even the slight risk, even though they don't meet the danger standards, so to say, the toxicity standards. They're looking at numbers much lower. And even if you have signs of it, I think at like 100 parts per trillion. Yep. That's a part per trillion is a drop in 1,000 swimming pools. So even at extremely low levels, the state's being very careful, making sure people get on bottled water until they put in a remediation technology, or probably be some type of what we call pump and treat system. I used to work on these systems all the time, and actually start pulling in the water, cleaning it up, and remediating the system. You're looking at 400, 500, 600 homes, something like that may have been affected, and it's those homes that have individual private wells. Those that are on town water are fine, but those who are on individual wells, the state's, I think, has gone above and beyond in making sure that they're addressing the problem and moving forward.
Is that tied to a regulatory environment for, and you talk about sort of attracting businesses, and everybody talks about regulatory environments. Is that sort of working with businesses, more regulation?
Yeah,
How do we balance that?
It's funny. This is a chemical in the water that there is currently no exact regulatory standard for. There's some guidelines set by the EPA. The fact, only in the past couple of years are we able to detect at these super, super low levels. Technology has gotten us to that point. So it has not been determined what the true regulatory level is. That's not really over-regulation when I talk about it. It's just being careful, frankly. You always have to be smart about how you do that and making sure that you're protecting the environment without going so far as to hinder economic growth. This really doesn't have anything to do with economic growth. It just simply has to do with a danger level in the water. When we talk about over-regulation in businesses, we're talking about a lot of departments in the state whose goals and initiatives seem more towards finding the problem and finding people for that problem, letting people know what they can't do. I don't tell me what you can't do. Impress me with what you can do. Let's be positive. Let's try to get the ball moving forward, as opposed to just handing out the fines, saying, oh, this is what you exceeded, and that's it. Good luck.
So
that's not the right way.
Government focused on the future.
On the future, on moving forward, on not simply creating fines and fees and levies to keep themselves occupied with the job. We need to get business out of people's way. Let me go back, if I could, really quick to the Sununu project.
And we got about 10 seconds, so you got to be really quick.
It was very clear. The Mullers, who promoted that project, said something very clear to me, which stuck with me. They said working with New Hampshire was harder than working with Vermont, Colorado, or any other state they had to deal with. That told me right there, we have to do better as a state about getting out of people's way, opening up our regulatory environment, and getting business moving again.
And with that, we got to stop right now, but we'll have you back.
Anytime. Thank you so much.
You're
Appreciate
welcome.
it.
And thank you for joining us for this edition of Capital Connections, your weekly access to politics and policy along the I-89 and I-91 corridors and how it impacts your life in our region. If you've got a comment or an idea for a future show, please email me. And more importantly, please join us again at this same time next week for another edition of Capital Connections.